Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something really interesting, kind of a cultural mapping exercise. We're taking a look at two very different places on the Korean Peninsula, one in the north, one south, using our notes and sources here to see how things like geography and history create these completely distinct identities.
It really is a study in extremes, isn't it? You've got Chagang province in North Korea, isolated, mountainous, basically a military-industrial fortress built around self-reliance.
Right.
And then the total opposite, Daegu in South Korea, a huge, vibrant city, wide open, a global hub for textiles, culture, fashion.
Mountains versus a basin, iron versus silk, almost literally. Isolation versus, global trade. We're looking at how just one border seems to twist everything, food, language, even music, into these two completely different cultural realities. So how did they get so different?
Let's start with the land itself, the geography. Let's look north first. Chagang province. Our sources painted it as, well, incredibly remote, really rugged mountains everywhere in the DPRK. And that's not just scenery, right? That terrain basically dictates its whole identity. Precisely. That rough geography shaped its history. Even before Korea was divided, during the Japanese occupation, say 1910 to 45, those mountains were shelters for anti-Japanese fighters.
Oh, okay.
Then after the Korean War, that same isolation became strategic. Chagang was deliberately developed into this heavily protected military-industrial zone. They literally hid weapons factories deep in the mountains, away from potential attacks.
Which makes it sort of the perfect symbol for North Korea's core philosophy, Juche, self-reliance. It's pushed as the ideal because it's got resources, timber, minerals, hydropower, and it's naturally defended.
Yeah, and if you think back to that big push for industrialization after the war, the Chalima movement from '56 onwards, the Flying Horse campaign, Chagang's industry, especially metals, was key to that whole story. It really cemented its image as the, quote, iron heart of the revolution.
But hang on, isn't that a bit of a contradiction? It's self-reliance, okay, but if they're isolated and building advanced defense stuff, where did the tech and resources come from to build those factories in the first place?
That's a really sharp point. The self-reliance part is mostly ideological, for the people living there. The reality, especially early on, was heavy reliance on Soviet and Chinese help for military development. But the propaganda always stresses how the region forged its own steel, using local stuff, intense labor, regardless of outside help. And since the big famine in the 90s, our sources confirm Chagang stayed one of the most closed-off areas. It reinforces that whole fortress idea, militarily and economically.
Okay, so Chagang's identity, walls, isolation, iron. Let's flip 180 degrees south then to Daegu. This isn't mountains. It's a city smack bang in the middle of a huge basin.
Right. It's almost geographically designed for trade and lots of people. Being in a basin surrounded by hills means incredibly hot summers. That's where you get that great nickname, Defrica. It's a really intense, high-energy place.
And unlike Chagang's military focus, Daegu's historical significance was more administrative, wasn't it? A major center back in the Joseon dynasty. It was also important during the resistance against Japan, like the March 1st movement protests in 1907 started there.
And its story during the Korean War is vital, too. The huge Nakdong River battle happened nearby. But Daegu itself was never captured. It stayed this key stronghold. That history of resilience didn't lead to isolation, though. It led to adaptation. After the 1960s, Daegu really looked outwards, transforming itself into an engine for the global market, especially in textiles and fashion exports.
So, yeah, the contrast is really emerging. North, digging resources out for defense, symbolized by isolation and iron. South, weaving materials for global trade, symbolized by openness and, well, silk. And that economic and geographic split just completely shapes daily life, doesn't it? If you live in Chagang, your life is, by necessity, rugged, focused on resources, logging, forestry, metalworking, hydropower.
That scarcity really defines the culture. Because there's so little farmland in the mountains, the diet is heavy on staples that last. Corn, potatoes, barley, you're not talking fine dining. The food is about making the most of what's there, simple things like potato pancakes, basic stews, heavy dumplings.
What I found really telling, though, is the reliance on foraging and hunting. It's not a weekend hobby, it's essential. Sources mention how important foraged foods are: wild ginseng, mushrooms, pine nuts, and hunting game just to supplement the pool harvests. That really speaks to, enduring hardship.
Even clothing reflects the need and the climate. Think heavy, practical stuff for those brutal winters. Padded jackets, tough trousers, fur hats. And because the defense industry is so dominant, military uniforms, or just uniform-style work clothes, are apparently very common. Everything's built to last, for function.
Okay, now let's mentally jump south again to Daegu. The focus shifts completely. It's all about flavor, fashion, global connections. The economy is based on finished goods, services. It's known as Korea's fashion capital, hosting the big Daegu Fashion Fair.
But it's not just modern commerce. Daegu has these deep roots in traditional knowledge, too, like the Yangyang traditional medicine market. It's been there for over 350 years. And that history creates this interesting mix.
Yeah.
You've got ancient herbal remedies right alongside cutting-edge modern medical facilities.
And the food sounds so much richer, reflecting that market abundance and history. You mentioned the Defrika heat. Does the food match that?
Often, yeah. Local specialties include makchang, that's grilled pork intestines, and a really popular spicy chicken stew called jimdak.
Makchang, grilled intestines. Okay.
This sounds intense, but makchang is a great example of the city's working-class roots and market history. Back when Daegu was a huge market hub, they used every part of the animal, waste not, want not. It's often eaten with these flat dumplings, napjak mandu, maybe washed down with herbal teas, tying back to that traditional medicine culture again.
And the style contrast. It's just night and day. Chagong, padded jackets for survival. Daegu, known globally for modern fashion, high-end textiles. They're exporting trends, aesthetics, not just trying to stay warm.
Okay, so if culture flows from geography and economy, then the music is like its soundtrack. For Qigong, the state propaganda is all about that industrial toughness. Slogans like Qigong, Fortress of Self-Reliance, or where Juche Seal is forged, these are constantly reinforced.
And the music reflects that perfectly, based on our notes. The description is, wow, industrial folk meets dark folk metal ballad, symphonic opera. That sounds incredibly heavy. How does that even work musically?
Well, imagine sound design mimicking a factory. You get these heavy, metallic drum sounds, maybe a bowed bass grinding away, and often the sound of the morin khur.
The Morin Khur, what's that?
It's a two-stringed fiddle with a horse head carved on top, often associated with Mongolian or nomadic music. It has this really haunting, kind of desolate, droning sound that perfectly captures the isolation and the harsh mountain landscape.
Okay, so the industrial noise isn't just added effects. It's meant to sound like the metalworking plants.
Hmm.
And the lyrics are pure grit, right? Defiance against hardship. We saw those lines. Steel heart beats. And then the iron hand carves destiny. Stereogenic.
Exactly. It's the official sound of resilience through heavy industry and isolation. Now, contrast that with Daegu. The sound couldn't be more different. The whole cultural scene is vibrant. They host huge international events, the Daegu International Opera Festival, the Daegu International Musical Festival, or DIM.
And obviously, it's the hometown of global K-pop stars like V and Suga from BTS. The genre description here is K-pop meets Korean opera, electro-traditional fusion. Quite a mix.
And Daegu's slogan is Colorful Daegu, and the music reflects that energy. Forget metallic drums and drones. Here you've got modern synths, electric guitars blended right in with traditional instruments, things like the gayajim or geomungo, those are traditional zitters, and the haegyum, which is a type of fiddle, all backed by dynamic Korean drums like the buk or jangu.
That mix of synths and ancient strings must create a really unique sound. And the themes are different too. Vibrancy, pride, maybe a bit of nostalgia. The lyrics celebrate the city itself.
Colorful Daegu, light the fire tonight. You'll see, you see.
It sounds dynamic, outward-looking. The complete opposite of that stoic fortress sound.
Okay, let's try and tie this all together then. How do these really entrenched opposite cultural identities actually show up in the people themselves, in how they talk?
Well, for Qigong, the stereotype is pretty much forged in those mountains.
Hmm.
People are seen as stoic, rugged, incredibly self-reliant. Their dialect is part of the Pyongan group, apparently with a really rough local intonation. Sounds like it's carved from the landscape itself.
Yeah.
Local sayings are often about survival, enduring cold or lack of food.
And then Daegu, totally different stereotype. People there are seen as more straightforward, warm, but also really proud. Proud of their city, their history, and especially their dialect. They've also produced a lot of major political figures in the South, which kind of underlines their historical importance. Absolutely. And their language is the Gyeongsang Satori. Now, Satori just means regional dialect, but the Gyeongsang version you hear in Daegu is often described as sharp, fast-paced, with a really strong intonation. Very decisive sounding.
Yeah, you can see that in some of the slang examples. Very direct, like, yo, Miohano, for what are you doing? Or that incredibly punchy interjection, yo, which can mean anything from hey you to cut it out. Feels very upfront, no nonsense. matches the city's energy.
It does. So you got these two completely different ways of seeing the world, built from different landscapes and ideologies. But if you zoom out a bit, the thing that links them, perhaps surprisingly, is this shared history of intense resilience.
Right. Chagang shows resilience through enduring isolation, harsh conditions, military focus, defining strength by looking inward, prioritizing defense.
Exactly. Whereas Daegu's resilience comes from surviving the war and then constantly adapting to the chaos of modern global industry, reinventing itself time and again as this global hub for medicine, fashion, whatever comes next. That ability to change while holding on to a strong local identity like that Gyeongsang Setari pride that seems key. And this brings up a pretty interesting final question. Hashtag tag outro.
So we've taken this deep dive today from Chagang's closed-off fortress mountains where Juche steel is forged and people supposedly carve destiny with an iron hand, all the way south to the bustling, colorful streets of Daegu, home of K-pop megastars and high fashion. It really is a journey from the stoic steel heart to the bright neon lights.
And that stark contrast leaves us with this final thought for you to consider. In one place, survival and identity are tied to isolation and the military. In the other, they're tied to adapting history, like that 350-year-old medicine market, into fiercely competitive global trade. So what does it really mean for a place's future when its identity is so deeply connected to either defense or exports? And maybe, just maybe, what kind of music will people in Chagang and Daegu be making 20 years down the line?